Morning all. So happy Friday to everybody. And because we only have two games today, I will be combining the preview and the news video into one. And there's the possibility of another news video later today. Not very likely though. It feels like the news is slowing down a little bit. It's just a bunch of injury stuff and who is or isn't on the COVID list from day to day. And I'm kind of skipping that because it becomes very repetitive and just yeah, so I'm just leaving that as it is, and unless we see long-term absences, that kind of thing, then I'll report on it. So, two games tonight, 2 hours apart, so I'll be able to watch a majority of both games. Boston's in against the Rangers at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. So, for the Rangers who might be looking for a little more closing to their game tonight than they had in the last meeting with Boston, they're 4-5-3. Boston's 9-1-2. So we'll see if the Rangers can even up this back-to-back series. Back-to-backs generally do end up being splits, although I think that number is starting to change now. Now, the Rangers will also be without Panarin, so that's going to make it more difficult. And for Ryan Strome, heavy lifting for him tonight. He is with Kakko and Lafreniere. If he can get Lafreniere on the board, that'd be a good start. Lafreniere, again, it's early, it's his rookie year, but so far he hasn't performed up to what was expected this season from him. At 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, St. Louis in against Arizona. For the St. Louis Blues, they are 7-4-2. For Arizona, 6-5-1. I am wearing Arizona because I figured I haven't worn the Space Coyote in a while. I might as well. So, special occasion and all, sure. They're at home. They're playing against St. Louis for, I think, the 27th straight game. I think it's 27 straight games they've played each other. It's been a lot. It's going to continue. And if Colorado and Minnesota decide to stay in protocols for an extra week, do they just tack on a couple more games between St. Louis and Arizona? Just there you go. And it's an interesting question too. Do we get to 56 games by maybe changing the schedule a little bit, where maybe you say, well, we've only got X number of games left. We'll just have an extra game between Boston and the Rangers to make up the difference. We'll have an extra game between St. Louis and Arizona, or are they just going to say forget it and cancel games? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But for tonight, we just have the two games, and I figure I might as well wear Arizona because why not? Now, the season is scheduled to end 12 weeks from tomorrow. Yes, there is an extra week to 10 days they can add on to that. But the idea right from the beginning was to have this condensed schedule and as many games in it as possible. What we're seeing is, and with all the teams that are currently shut down or slowly making their way back onto the ice, is that because all these games are condensed together in the way the testing had been set up, it feels like we might be having more outbreaks than if we had fewer games over a more stretched out period of time. So it might actually be counterproductive to have so many games over such a short period. But again, the NHL trying to navigate something they've never had to navigate before. So here we are. And like I said, 12 weeks from Saturday, the season's scheduled to end, which isn't very long. It may feel like it right now for those of us here in Canada where our temperatures are kind of chilly, but it's not that long, really, 12 weeks. Draft lottery. So if you don't like the draft lottery, you may be happy to hear they're talking about changing it. Then you may be less happy when you hear about how they're changing it. Potentially. Again, this is all potentially. It's all out there. And Red Wing fans are already upset because, of course they are. They're still upset about having the number 4 draft pick in this draft, even though Raymond may end up being the best player in that draft. It could happen. But draft lottery changes are likely. Also, the idea that we don't have a draft in 2021, that we have 2 the following year, that seems to be gaining more and more traction now as the weeks go by. If general managers decide that's what they want to do, I can't see why the NHL wouldn't be okay with that. Besides which, if you have two drafts in 2022, you can probably have them in 2 separate locations. You could probably have them a week apart. You can probably sell tickets for both and have just a great return to form by the National Hockey League. Anything that involves spectators that you can push back to when you can have spectators makes sense. But at the same time, we're not seeing the amount of scouting that we normally would for draft class, because you can't. WHL, we'll talk about them in a bit, but I don't know how accurate all the scouting is going to be this year. So, yeah, the idea of pushing it back is looking more and more likely. But what's interesting is there's also talk about having the draft lottery this year and then having the draft next year. So at the end of this year, have the draft lottery, and then we won't know who they're picking until the following year. That's insane. Now, what that means is that a team could potentially, let's say that in the draft lottery, let's say Minnesota wins the draft lottery. Just throwing that out there. Minnesota wins the draft lottery, and they look at the 2021 draft and they go, I don't know, the guy who's at number 1, Owen Power. Let's say it's Owen Power. We don't feel that we need Owen Power. They do, but let's just say they don't. Or we feel like we can get something for this pick. So over the next year, they'd be able to field offers, and who knows, they might be able to come out and have themselves a really good deal for that pick. So we'll see what happens, but part of the discussion right now is that if you get a top 3 pick in 1 year, you can be locked out of the following year. So this is where if Detroit picks top 3 in 2021, which is seen as not a weak draft. A weak draft is wrong, but again, because there's not the right level of scouting, it's more of a wild card draft is what I'd call it. 2022, of course, Shane Wright's coming into that one. So the idea of getting a top 3 pick in the wild card draft and then being locked out of the actually really solid, could be game-changing draft that's the Shane Wright draft, that's already generating some discussion from Detroit fans. And as a Canuck fan, I have to say, really? Like, all of a sudden now the NHL saying, this just doesn't seem fair. Vancouver gets bumped down in the draft lottery for, 4 straight years, and not a peep. And now, well, it's happening to this team, so, we've got to change the draft lottery. That's interesting. So it is a general manager idea, this idea that if you are in the top 3 1 year, you can't be in the top 3 the next year, because they don't like intentional tanking. And this is the thing. The National Hockey League doesn't like a full strip everything down rebuild. Let's just tear everything out and just add a bunch of number 1 draft picks, because it just they don't think that's a way to stay competitive. And I also think it's interesting too that when you've got a team that's been at the bottom of the league for a while, and the assumption is that they're going to stay at the bottom of the league for another 3-4 years. So people look ahead and they go, well, we'd like that guy in 2022. We'd like that guy in 2023. So they're not going to be competitive for years. So general managers don't like that. And I don't think the NHL wants to encourage that either, which is why the draft lottery was changed, so that teams like Carolina, like the Rangers, they jump up and they win the draft lottery as teams that miss the playoffs, or in the Rangers' case last year, missed the round of 16. They didn't get out of the play-in round. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of changes they make, and if they make things a little more different. I wouldn't mind if the entire draft order could perhaps be changed by a couple of spots for each team, just to say, hey, this team won the Stanley Cup, but they're going to draft 28th this year. Like, it'll be interesting to see if they make massive changes or if it's just some small change at the top, and it'll probably be a small change at the top. Chris Drury has been named general manager of the U.S. team for the 2021 IHF World Championships. That's, of course, the men's team. And Chris Drury, it's interesting because he's an associate GM for the New York Rangers, and he was one of the finalists for the Pittsburgh job that went to Ron Hextall. Drury is seen as a guy who will be a general manager in the National Hockey League. He's just working his way up. And if he does well putting together an American team for the Worlds, it could even get him further onto the map as a future general manager in the National Hockey League. All right. Minnesota Wild, when they hit the ice today, when Marcus Foligno hit the ice today, he actually said woohoo. Excited to be back on the ice. So while we have all these teams out, and there's still a lot of games that are postponed tomorrow as well, and it's a bit of a downer when you're looking at the schedule and you see that many games that are postponed, teams are starting to get ready to come back. So Minnesota looks to be getting ready to come back in and start playing. There's still an alarming number of players who are on the COVID lists for certain teams, but they're trying to work their way through that and get back onto the ice. And if you're a Sens fan, the good news was that Zub was held out last night just in case, but he tested negative. So Zub should be back in for the next game for Ottawa. So if the NHL can get all of this dealt with now and straightened out and all of that wonderful stuff, hopefully we have fewer and fewer postponements as the season goes on. I'm an optimist, I can say that. Leo Komarov is back on waivers today. It has been 30 days since he last cleared waivers. This is just a move on paper. Basically, they know Komarov's not going to get taken, but every 30 days you have to put him on waivers. And so look for other players to end up back on waivers again as a move to make sure they can move guys to the taxi squad as need be and then back into the lineup. It's just a move to make sure they can do that. And it's for salary cap reasons too, right? So, yeah, Komarov being on waivers, he's not going to get taken. So, yesterday, the Red Deer Rebels, as an organization, made the news for taking a pretty extreme tack in order to try to make sure they are able to finish the season. So, Red Deer is going to have all of their players housed at the arena for a 24-game season. So, there won't be fans in attendance, but the players are going to be there to basically live there for the 24-game season. They're the only team in the WHL that I know of that's made this announcement. It is pretty extreme. It really is. It's a pretty extreme move for Red Deer to do that, but I understand. I totally understand. And yet, with NHL players, they're being told, hey, can you guys, I don't know, try to be safe, please? When you're at home? Because on the road they have all of these strict guidelines, but at home it had been more kind of a loosey-goosey setup, and now they're kind of trying to constrict that just a little bit. And meanwhile in juniors, so you guys are living in the arena now. You belong to us. A little bit of a difference. Just a small difference right there. Yesterday, the Arizona Coyotes, another reason to wear the Space Coyote jersey, they terminated Associate General Manager Steve Sullivan's contract. I haven't seen anything yet as to why. But for Arizona, honestly, there's a lot of restructuring going on. They've said they're not going to look to replace him during the season. So they may have looked at his job, and it might have been like an office space setup of what would you say it is you do here? And they may not have liked the announcement, or they might have just looked at their organization and said, we feel that this is a redundant position, that somebody else could do this work for less money, or we have somebody else sitting over here that can do that work. Or maybe something happened with Sullivan that they felt that they needed to part ways with him. And so there it is. But we'll see if Arizona does do restructuring. New ownership, new people in charge of the money. Don't be surprised if Arizona's trying things a little bit different. The team has lost money, and every time you talk about Arizona, there's all these people, move the team to Quebec, move the team to Antarctica, whatever. But the reality is they've got an owner now that has deep pockets but wants to turn a profit. So look for things to change with Arizona in order to try to turn a profit, and this may be part of that as well. 3 Ice, a league trying to get itself going with the idea of playing a summer season and 3-on-3 hockey, which I think could work. I really do. I think 3-on-3 hockey could work as a full 60-minute game. Now, why I think 3-on-3 hockey can absolutely work is it's a lot less players on the team, right? So it's a lot less players on the team. Be easier to work things out budget-wise. It's an exciting game. And so they were supposed to debut this summer. They pushed that back to the summer of 2022. So they've looked at the financial situation right now in general and said, this is a bad time to start things up. We'll just start things up in 2022. Because the feeling was if they started up this summer, they'd probably lose a bunch of money. And then the long-term viability of the league would come into question. So this way, they feel that they should be able to get themselves on TV next year and be able to make some money while they're doing it. And they've already got TV agreements in place. So there is some reason to believe this could work. I just wonder if it's summer hockey, how many people are going to watch 3-on-3 summer hockey, especially if it's a league that doesn't have household names in it. So there may be some gimmicks along the way. We'll see if they have some gimmicks in there too. But it could be interesting, right? All right, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.